Namaste and welcome everybody. We all are here to celebrate Professor Uttam RajBhandhary's exceptional life in academia and research. My name is Prabhat Kunwar. I'm a neuroscientist by training, work in a drug discovery area that involve metabolic and brain disorders. It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce to you our guest, Dr. RajBhandary. Dr. RajBhandary is not only a well-respected scientist, but also a beloved teacher. Currently, he is the Lester Wolfe Professor at the Department of Biology at MIT. He has been there since 1969, completing 52 years of glorious service. During this time, he has taught thousands of students, and he still teaches several courses each year. He also trained hundreds of students, including PhDs, many undergrads, postdoctoral fellows, and other scientists. When it comes to research, he is a living legend. Let me repeat, living legend in molecular biology. He is known for making fundamental discoveries in molecular biology and also developing technology. Dr. RajBhandary and his team made seminal discoveries regarding protein synthesis and the genetic code, which was a major mystery in biology after the discovery of the DNA structure by Watson and Crick. Dr. RajBhandhary's discovery involved identification and structure and functional analysis of tRNA. It's also called transfer RNAs. And transfer RNA read message, genetic codes from the mRNA and help to make proteins. His group was first to sequence phenylalanine tRNA and one of the earliest to sequence any transfer RNAs. He identified and sequenced more than 15 tRNAs. In terms of the technology, he developed techniques to isolate, tag, and sequence RNAs, both transfer RNAs and mRNAs. That completely changed the field at that time. He was also first to do site-directed mutagenesis and develop vector, M3, M13 vector for cloning. Together, he made a lasting legacy. His work helped to make significant advancement in the field of molecular biology, medicine, and biotechnology. Such an important accomplishment requires that you work with other equally brilliant scientists and earn their respect. Dr. RajBhandary is also known to have had great collaboration with many prominent scientists of his time, including Nobel laureate Hargobind Khurana, who was also his postdoc mentor. He collaborated with Arthur Kornberg, Paul Berg, Phil Sharp, Richard Roberts, Mike Smith, Harvey Lodis, Sidney Altman, and then list also includes Binky Ramakrishnan, Mario Capacchi, Roger Kornberg, Andrew Fire, and many others. 11 of these, his collaborators, went on to win Nobel Prize. He authored more than 200 papers, which are cited 12,000 times. Among many honors, he was elected to become a fellow at the American Academy of Art and Science in 1991. He was also an associate head of biology for 8 years. Despite his many accomplishments and honor, Dr. RajBhandary has taken to help Nepal and to be a source of inspiration to many Nepali scientists and researchers. He visited Nepal and gave lectures and interacted with the students and government officials. He also helped with the many MIT initiatives that were aimed to help Nepal. He inspired many new generation Nepali students and scientists, including myself. So, friends, it is a source of pride for many Nepali that this remarkable man was born and he spent early years in Nepal. Today, we'll hear about his amazing journey that started in Nepal. Now, let me welcome Dr. RajBhandary to share his story that starts in Nepal. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. RajBhandary.
Thank you, Prabhat. First of all, I'd like to thank Doctors Prabhat Kunwar, Dr. Bista, Dr. Shrestha, and Dr. Tisdale, and other members of the International Nepali Biomedical Society for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm deeply honored by this invitation, and I'm looking forward to this conversation and hopefully some kind of two-way conversation eventually. I was asked to basically talk about me and my life. So that's what I will do. I will probably not talk much about the research work that we have done in our lab with the help of students and postdoctoral fellows. But I'll talk basically about my life, my career, and what has brought me from a place, that at one time had a single college in all of Nepal, Trichandra College, to a place like MIT now. And the thing that I show here in the slide is my scientific journey, which started in Kathmandu, then took me to Calcutta, then to Newcastle in the United Kingdom, and from there to Madison, Wisconsin in the United States, and to Cambridge, MIT. And that's where I've been for the last, as Dr. Kunwar has said, I've been there for the last 52 years. Now, first of all, I would like to talk about where I come from. Where I came from is really in Patan, in Nepal, in the Valley of Nepal, Kathmandu Valley of Nepal. And I come from a large family. The large family, the great grandfather had 7 sons. And the 7 sons, 6 of the 7 sons have still more or less stayed together. So we grew up in a place called Kwalkutol in Patan, and with lots and lots of cousins and uncles and aunts and everybody around us. And in fact, the RajBhandary clan of the 7 brothers, 6 of them stayed there and 1 went to Kathmandu, but even the 7th one still comes back every so often. And the clan compound, as we call it, but it's not really a compound, there are no walls, but has 6 chokes, courtyards, and each courtyard has 4 buildings. So, each of the 4 buildings and each of the 6 courtyards are all interconnected when I was growing up. And you could go from one house to another house to another house like that, all the way. And so you really felt that you were all part of a very big family, large family. And that really is how I grew up. There were about, I would say at the time, there were probably 250 to 300 RajBhandharis living in this compound and in one compound in Kathmandu, in one house in Kathmandu. And the family was close-knit. We even had, and it was made so by many social and religious connections. Every year they were almost mandated where everybody came to these social and religious occasions where the entire RajBhandary family would go to a temple in Patan or a temple in a place near Godavari called I've forgotten the name of that temple, Vajrabarahi, and that's the area where I think the ancestral family came from, near Vajrabarahi. So Vajrabarahi temple was a temple that we almost consider our ancestral temple. So we got there. So everybody would come there. And so that really kept the RajBhandary connection alive, I think, until today. Now, when I was growing up, as I said, I had many uncles, cousins, and all that. And cousins were of my age, some of my age with whom I played, others older than me from whom I learned. And there were others who younger than me, of course, many younger than me. So when I was growing up, I don't remember going to any elementary school or secondary school. I just don't remember it anymore. But I learned basically from my father believed in giving children a good education. And so he had, for me, he had many tutors. He got to give me, he taught me Sanskrit and language and other things. But the things like geography, mathematics, I learned from my older cousins who had studied in India and come back with training in those areas. For English, there was a distant relation. I learned from a teacher who also happened to be a teacher at Patna High School. He taught English at Patna High School, so I learned English from him. His son, became a friend of mine, Jagadishwar Man Pradhan, and his son and I were friends, and we talked English together a lot. And so I learned a little bit of English language and English grammar from just generally talking English with Jagadishwar, my friend, and his father, the English teacher. So basically, that's what where I learned most of my stuff. And in terms of sports, while I was in Nepal, well, we played sports, but not, nothing fancy. I played soccer. You might be interested to know. We played soccer every so often because just to get some good exercise. And so we went to a place called Lowenkhel. Lowenkhel was about 15-minute walk from our house. Many of my cousins would go there, and anybody from the neighborhood, we would gather and go there. And we played. We did not have soccer balls at that time. We played soccer with some fruit called vogtia. Vogtia is a big fruit, with something like what in the West is grapefruit, but it's a much bigger grapefruit. And so we played soccer with vogtia and with no shoes, no cleats, like soccer players now have, no shoes, no cleats of any kind, and just on our bare feet. So that's one sport that we played. The other sports that we played is badminton. My father got me a badminton set, and so we played badminton, just with the net hung between the two buildings within a choke and things like that. And the other games that I played with my cousins who were about the same age as me, we grew. The three of us were together a lot. And we played together was marbles. We played marbles. We played a game that I don't even know what it's called. It's a game made out of a seed of some fruit. Oh, it's called. It's a hard seed of a fruit, and you can put a nail at one end of the seed, hammer a nail at one end of the seed, and twist it so that it goes round and round and round and round. And three of us would do that, all do it at the same time, and the one that stopped earlier would lose. And that kind of games we played. So I distinctly remember those things. Now, school, I eventually went to Patna High School. And I think I went to Patna High School for only about 4 or 5 years. That's about what I remember. Because most of my teaching was really done through reading, through tutoring at home, and through learning from my cousins. So I finished my SLC early at the age of 14. So from there, we have to go somewhere. And the only place to go from Patna High School was Trichandra College. There was no university at that time in Nepal, no other colleges, just one college, in Trichandra College, which was affiliated with the University of Patna. So I went to Trichandra College. I would ride my bicycle to Trichandra College from Patna and come back. I should, maybe I should tell you one more thing about my early days. Is before I go into Trichandra College, is my school things and things that I learned from the family at home. Learned a lot from having a large family. You see how people behave. You have many uncles and aunts and older cousins and things like that. So you learn a lot. But I learned a lot from my mother and from my father. And my father to me was really a guiding light. He was one of the most kind and generous of the people that I know. And he taught me many things. He was scrupulously honest in what he did. He was a customs officer, lowly at the beginning, and then he rose up through the ranks to become the chief of customs. He was a customs officer, and he could have been rich if he had been really unscrupulous, but he was not. He was scrupulously honest, and he had integrity that really I have kind of emulated him, in many respects for that. And most importantly, he practiced what he preached. He not only said you have to do this, but he showed that he would, he believed in what he was saying. He practiced what he preached, and so he became a kind of what they call a role model, if you like. That he was someone that you could emulate, and someone that you could learn from, and someone you could admire. So this is what I learned from my father: to try to be honest, to have integrity, to be kind and generous to people, and to be understanding of other people's problems, and to have empathy for other people's situations. And my mother was also equally wonderful person. And she was loving, most loving person that I know of. And she was incredibly gentle and kind to people, and not only to her children, but to everybody. And both my mother and my father lived to their 90s. My mother till the age of 99, and my father till his mid 90s, I would say. Yeah, so that's where I come from. Yeah. So from there, I went to, after finishing my studies at Patna High School, I went to Trichandra College, and Trichandra for a 4-year degree. And you know that at Trichandra College, you go through 2 years and you get what's called an intermediate degree, ISC, intermediate in science, and then 2 more years and you get a bachelor's degree. The idea was that I would get an intermediate degree and then go from there to medical school. This is what many people who come from the British system of medical schools do. They could get what's called an MBBS. That was the plan. That the idea was that I think that I'm the oldest son, that I would get a good education and earn some money. And at that time, the best thing to do was to be a doctor. But unfortunately, I found out that to go to medical school, you need to have taken courses in botany and zoology. And I had not done that for my ISC. I did not know that, or somebody didn't tell me that, or I just was not good. So I had not taken botany and zoology, so I had no choice either to stay behind and take botany and zoology and then go to medical school, or to go ahead and go get a bachelor's degree. And that's what I did. I forgot the idea of wanting to go to medical school, and then I ended up getting a degree in physics, mathematics, and chemistry, a BSc degree from the University of Patna. Now I need to tell you a couple of things about the teachers at that time. I distinctly remember the teacher. These are 2 very flamboyant teachers. A teacher of mathematics, his name was Ashutosh Ganguly, and a teacher of physics, his name was Ashutosh Sen. And I remember particularly a teacher of physics who would demonstrate some experiments in physics. He had a typical, really exciting development thing that he taught on what's called Van de Graaff generators. And in the pitch of blackness, there would be big light and big things. And so it was very vivid kind of things. And these people, the Ganguly and Sen came from India, I think, and there was a compound for them right next to Trichandra College. They lived right next to Trichandra College. Yes, and then for chemistry, I distinctly remember 2 professors, Prasantaman Singh and Amrit Prasad, I think, and these are the 2 professors in chemistry. And the demonstrator for the chemistry labs, when you do work in the lab, was my cousin, Kesab Lal. We call him Kesab Dai because he was much older than me. but he was my cousin, and we were part of the same joint family in Patan. So that after that, I got my degree, bachelor's. I think I was fortunate to do well. And at that time, this was soon after the Britain had let go of its colonies. India had been let go free, unfortunately partitioned to India and Pakistan, and Ceylon was free, Burma was free, and all that stuff. And so they've come together as part of the British Commonwealth and started a Colombo plan called the Colombo Plan. Colombo Plan because the meeting for that plan was held in Colombo in Ceylon, at that time Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, right? And so, so Colombo Plan, the idea of Colombo Plan was to help each other to educate, and in education and things like that. And Nepal was, of course, not a part of the British Commonwealth, never was taken over by Britain. But somehow they decided that Nepal should also be a part of it because maybe Nepal would benefit from it. So we had started some kind of fellowship program, scholarship program for students from Nepal, 2 or 3 scholarships, I think. And I was lucky to get one of those scholarships to go for my master's degree in chemistry. So for my master's degree in chemistry, I had really hoped to go to Calcutta. So I applied to Calcutta and didn't hear from them for a long time. So I applied to Patna and got into Patna University. So I did go to Patna for about a month, but after a month I heard from Calcutta University. So I quickly moved to Calcutta. And I joined Presidency College in Calcutta for a master's degree in chemistry, hoping that I would do a master's in focusing on organic chemistry. So Calcutta, it was a 2-year study. Unfortunately, after the first year, I came home and I became sick for almost a year. So I lost 1 year, but then I made it up, and then I went back eventually to finish my master's degree, and that was a very enjoyable time. Calcutta at that time was, full of refugees because all the refugees from West Bengal, not West Bengal, East Bengal had come over to West Bengal. And so it was sad, but that was the experience that we all went through, all the refugees living on the streets and things like that. But eventually I got my master's degree. And again, I was fortunate to do well enough that there was another Colombo Plan scholarship available to me at that time. Again, Britain came with a Colombo Plan scholarship, and I got the scholarship, one of the scholarships, to go to England for a PhD degree. And that's what I did. And so I ended up going to a place called King's College in Newcastle. Now, I have to tell you one thing here is that many young people nowadays say that, at least in the United States, I can't say that in Nepal also that's the case. Many people in the United States, many of the people say that, well, I already knew what I wanted to be when I was 12 years old, or 14 years old, or something like that. And, they would say that, my father bought me a chemistry set, and I worked with the chemistry set in the basement of my house, and I did experiments and small fires and some explosions and things like that. But I became enamored with chemistry, and I became a chemist. Or they would say, I saw the Sputnik on television, and I wanted to be an astronaut or astronomer, and I've studied astronomy and things like that. So the idea is that many people really have made their mind up as to what they want to be, or what I want to be. But in my case, that's far from the truth. I never had any choice in what I had to do. In growing up, we had only one high school. We had to go to Pardon High School. Only one college. We had to go to Trinity College. And even going to Calcutta was for the first time I had to make a choice. I was allowed to make a choice, and even there I got it only after some time to the university of my choice, Calcutta University. And then going to King's College in Newcastle was not my choice. I had never heard of King's College in Newcastle, I have to admit. But that was a choice made by the British government, who gave me the scholarship to go there. And it was a very fortunate choice because I really loved it. And I went, and it was an interesting time. Let me see what time it is. Oh, geez, yeah. So I'm not gonna tell too many stories here.
No.
So,
We are good. We are good. Please continue.
So, so I ended up. It was a long journey. It was not. There's no going from New Delhi to London direct flight or something like that. So it was New Delhi to. I had to go on one of our DC-3s from those days. Very small plane, no jets. From Kathmandu to Delhi, and from Delhi to Pakistan, Karachi, Tehran, Basra in Iraq, Istanbul in Turkey, Frankfurt in Germany, and then London. So it was 5 or 6 stops before I eventually ended up in London and things like that. But from London, took the train to Newcastle, and that became a place where I did my research for the next 6 years. And Newcastle was a really first time I learned how to do research. Jim Baddeley was a professor who had moved to Newcastle after really getting some really good education and doing some very wonderful research work with someone named Alexander Todd. Alexander Todd was very famous. Baddeley was a student of Alexander Todd. Alexander Todd was very famous. He got a Nobel Prize in chemistry for his work on RNA, actually. He's not known for his work on RNA, but he got a Nobel Prize for his work on one of the works in RNA that he did, and nucleotide chemistry, basically. That's what he got the Nobel Prize in. And he then became a member of the House of Lords in the British Parliament. He became, he was a very well-known person, Professor Sir Alexander Todd. So Baddeley welcomed me, and it was a great lab. He had done some wonderful work, and so he attracted lots of people from different countries. So besides me coming from Nepal, he had people from postdoctoral people from the United States, Russia at that time, USSR, Argentina, Italy, Poland. It's an international community. And so I learned a lot from just being around with them, and from being around with my pals who were graduate students doing PhD work, all from Britain. And I had it was a good friend of mine who also from Scotland. So it was so I learned a lot about doing research, doing science, and I have to thank Jim Baddeley for his mentorship and for the wonderful experience that I had in his lab. Now there's a slide of Jim Baddeley that is there somewhere. Prabhat, do you have slides, or does this begin have slides?
Yes, sir. I'll share that slide.
Yeah, the next one, I think. Yeah, that's it. That's Jim Baddeley here, a wonderful person, and not just a great scientist who taught me things, but also a very nice person. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. So this was that. Now, I have to tell you one story. Yeah. There's some lesson to be learned from that. Is in research, you do research, and your idea is that you are the first person to achieve something, and then you get a chance to publish it and all that stuff. So for my PhD work, that's the goal of a researcher, is to do that and feel that he or she has contributed in a very, very original way towards a knowledge base, knowledge, adding to the knowledge base in science. Now the goal of my PhD work was to synthesize a chemical called coenzyme A. Coenzyme A is a biochemically a very important compound, plays a role in many of the biological processes in a cell. And so that's the goal, was that I would chemically synthesize it. And it's a multi-step organic synthesis. I learned a lot in the process of doing it. But just about 2 or maybe 4 months before I was going to finish the work and write a PhD thesis, there was a paper published some from somewhere else, on the synthesis of coenzyme B. So someone else had synthesized it. In other words, someone else had scooped me, and I was the loser. And so that was sad. It was, it made me sometimes upset, angry, not angry, but somewhat upset that I lost. But the person who did the work was a person, a graduate student in the lab, working in the laboratory of Govind Khurana. So Govind Khurana's student beat me to it. And, and that stayed with me for quite some time. So things happened. I badly said, why don't you stay on as a postdoctoral fellow in my lab? So I said I would definitely do that. I applied for a fellowship. I got an MRC fellowship to stay for 3 more years. But then I had to make a decision. I had to either write my thesis right away, or I had also planned on coming back home to visit the family for a while. I hadn't done so for 3 whole years. So he said, well, your choice. You can go home and then, you can come back and start working on something else. So I did that. So I went home and, had a good time for 2 or 3 months, I think, in 1959. And came back and did some work, published the work that I had done on a different subject. And in 1962, just when I was finishing things, badly got a letter from Govind Khurana saying that I have moved from Vancouver to Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm looking for good people. And can you suggest good people? And I think Badley must have given me a very good recommendation, because he came and asked me whether I was interested. I said, sure, I'm interested, because by that time, the thing about being beaten by his student was gone. So and pretty soon I got a letter from Govind Khurana saying that, if you'd like to join my group, and here's an offer. So I accepted the offer. And in 1962, around end of September, early October, I made the trip. I left. I had a wife in England and a son. They stayed home so that I could at least go and find an apartment and all that stuff before they could come over. So that's what I did. And it was a harrowing journey, because I took a boat, a big boat, Queen Mary. Yeah, Queen Mary, from one of the Southampton to New York. And the weather was terribly bad across the Atlantic. It was the end of September, hurricane season. And I was very, very what's called seasick, not really feeling well at all for 5 whole days and all that. But I got into Madison, and soon I talked to Govind, and I was really, really excited to learn from Govind that the project that he had in mind for me was a project that he himself had been working on. And that it was on something called tRNA, transfer RNA, as Prabhat mentioned, tRNA. And I was very excited, because transfer RNA had been discovered only 5-6 years before, and it was really a very important biological molecule, central molecule in biology, in gene expression. And to be working on something like that, to me, was the pinnacle of what one can do in science. So I was very happy. And the idea was nothing big. The idea was that we would just find ways of tagging the ends of the RNA molecule. Just if this is an RNA molecule, you tag one end with something chemically, and we tag one end with something chemically. And it's basically to do something that a person named Fred Sanger had done, when he sequenced the first protein ever called insulin. Yeah, he sequenced insulin, he got the Nobel Prize for it. And he'd done the same thing, because he found ways of tagging peptides and thereby used the tag to sequence the peptides. So our idea was to do the same. And so we did that, and I published a paper. I was very pleased with that paper. And then Khurana said, look, now I think, by that time, there was rumblings that Hawley was working on something very important, that he was sequencing a tRNA molecule. And Khurana said, well, why don't you sequence a tRNA molecule? And so, but he also was very kind to me. He treated ever since I got to Madison, he treated me like I was more of a colleague than someone, a postdoc in his lab. He gave me 2 or 3 postdoctoral fellows. He got me 2 technicians. All, he got the grants for that, and he said, "Okay, you go down to work with me." They sent me to work. They sent them to work with me, and to work on that project. And so he gave me he asked me to work on the tRNA sequencing project. Left me alone. I could do anything I wanted, and all the papers that came out of it, except for one paper, he did not want to name it. And he was very generous from that point of view, really, also. And I have to tell you that Govind became a lifelong friend. I'll tell you eventually that I got to know him very, very, very well. He became a lifelong friend, and we were friends for a total of 49 years. 62 was when I went to his lab, and 2011 was when he passed away. And yeah, so it's also, it says something to learn in science. In science, you work on a project. If it's an important project, there will be other people working on the same project, and sometimes other people might beat you to it, and so you feel bad. But then you should never really get upset or angry at the other person, because this is what happened. Basically, that in one case, I felt bad that I got beaten in my PhD project, but then I ended up working with a person closely for the next 49 years together, and being one of his best friends. So in science, everything is forgotten. Science is what matters, and then friendship is, So that's the lesson that I think I learned, and I hope that everybody learns it. Yes. Competition is one thing, and yet the rest is life goes on. Yeah. So that was so I worked on tRNA, and eventually I sequenced the tRNA. Holly got the Nobel Prize for sequencing the very first tRNA molecule, and I sequenced, I think, maybe the first tRNA molecule. Only about a year and a half after, published only about a year and a half after. And after that, many things happened, and I should tell you on one more story, because meanwhile the genetic code was established by Govind Khorana's work, and Govind Khorana got the Nobel Prize within 2 years of publishing his papers. Within 2 years, Khorana and Nirenberg both got the Nobel Prize in 1968, along with Holly, who sequenced the first tRNA. So the 3 of them shared the Nobel Prize. And some interesting story about Khorana is that he was he was very focused person. He wanted to perfect everything. Everything he did was to perfection. Writing papers, for instance. Writing papers was not just to write something and have it published. Right? It had to be perfect for him. So to do that, he would disappear from the lab. He was himself working in the lab most of the time. For the genetic code work for which he got a Nobel Prize, he worked in the lab himself, along with several other postdoctoral people. But he was, when the genetic code was announced, when the Nobel Prize was announced, Khorana was the last person to know that he got the Nobel Prize. And the reason for it was that to write papers, he used to often go to a place away from home, away from the lab, to a very quiet place. He would rent a small room in a cottage by a lake. No telephones, no nothing. And his wife would drive him there and back. And so this is what had happened. He was there, and his wife had no way of contacting him by phone. And she had to drive all the way there to tell him that he won the Nobel Prize. So we all were in the lab waiting for him to arrive and all that stuff. But no, he arrived about 10:30 or something like that. He was among the last people to really know, because it was in the news all over. So that was an interesting story. But then it came a call from the office of the president of the University of Wisconsin, saying that, look, he said that I have newspaper journalists and TV journalists all crowding here, and they want to talk to you. And so, would you like to come? And Govind is an extremely humble and a modest person. He was not used to all this big noise about journalists and all that stuff. And so he said, would you like to come with me? So I actually said, yes, of course, I'll go with you. Just if you think that will be okay. So I went with him. And the reason I'm telling you the story is that I was not wearing a tie or anything. So I had to borrow a coat and a tie from one of my colleagues who comes from England, and who is 6'2" tall, much taller than me. And his coat was literally hanging almost to my knees. So I was wearing a coat that was far too long, far too big for me. So that's that way I ended up going with him to meet with the newspaper people. So that's the other thing is intense focus that he had on his problems of interest. And to him, so by the time, the next slide, if you can show the next slide, Prabhat, that's the slide that I show you. I want to show is that this is Karana, a picture of Karana that I took. This was okay. So in the afternoon of the day that he got the Nobel Prize, after he come back from meeting with the TV journalists and all that stuff, there was a celebration in the lab, and this is in the building attached to our lab, where several other faculty members from other departments are here to congratulate him. And you can see that everyone is holding a glass. This is glasses of champagne. So they're sipping on champagne. And what's Govind doing? Govind is not telling them about what was it that he got the Nobel Prize for. He's telling them about the work that his lab is doing now to do the next thing, to synthesize a gene out of the chemicals available just in the lab. So that's what he's explaining to them, how he was planning to synthesize the gene, and the work was had already started in the lab. So that's his intense focus on not on what's finished, but what's to come next. And that's really how he succeeded in science, and accolades that he got. And he's considered to be one of the greatest scientists of the 20th century. So he was one of my mentors, and I was really fortunate to have two mentors like that. Jim Baddeley on one hand for my PhD, and Govind Khurana for my postdoctoral work. And actually, I have to also tell you that 2 years after I arrived in Wisconsin, I got promoted to assistant professor. So I was an assistant professor there for 5 years. Now, at that time, the Nobel Prize came, and I've been there for 6 years, and I've been working, and I made some good progress in projects, enjoying it greatly. And the other thing Madison was really wonderful for was that it's a place where this was the heydays of molecular biology. This is when the field of molecular biology was just being established. Wisconsin had hired many, many young people, very active in research, young people who were molecular biologists. And they were all there and in the departments, buildings nearby. And I would go and talk to them. And I learned a lot from them, young people, learned a lot from them. And so I also decided that I would really now move into the area of molecular biology, because I was already slowly moving in that direction anyway. And I became a molecular biologist. That's when I became a really molecular biologist. And about that time, in various institutions now, were asking to see if I would be willing to go somewhere else, offering me jobs. And Govind was being offered jobs also in many places. And so MIT came with an offer to Govind. And MIT eventually came with an offer to me also. And so we had to decide as to whether what I wanted to do first. There's those who advised me that you really should separate from Govind now that because your name will be forever linked to him if you go with him. And then others said MIT is a different place. You will establish your own program, you will establish your own reputation, so go. So eventually I decided that we will go together. And so we both came together. Actually, I did not come together. I came a year before he did, because I was ready to get my lab established. So I came a year before he did, and then he followed a year after. And we got space, lab space in the same building. In fact, the two of us shared the whole floor of one of the new buildings at MIT for many, many years, for about 30, 25 years or so. And then we moved together to the new biology building. Also, we share lab space close by, and we had joint lab group meetings. So we follow each other's work, forever, basically. And that's how I really got to know him so well and got along so well with him. And because our two labs function basically as a unit, even though we were working on different problems. Yeah, so that was, so that's what brought me to MIT. Now, MIT, I've been there for 52 years. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. It's taught me many things. And, when you are a full-fledged faculty member, like I became at MIT, you have to do many things. You have to do teaching. You do your research. You have to have a research program. You do research program. Then you have to do other things for the department and for the institute. You have to be a good colleague and be part of the institute. You have to do that, be in the committees, be on this and that. And then you also have to do, at the same time, you also have to do your make service to the community being the community of scientists at large, nationally and internationally. So you have to do all of these things as a faculty member. And that's what MIT allowed me to do. Basically, that I was able to do all of that. And I think, like teaching, as Prabhat mentioned, I have taught a graduate course and an undergraduate course for almost all of my 52 years. Not all, but almost all of my 52 years. I've taught one graduate course and one undergraduate course every year. And in spite of that, I have really missed, and one of the worries in my life used to be that, what if I get sick? And always worried about, being sick and not having to cancel class and all that stuff. But I have to say I'm thankful that, because of good health, I really had no problem. And I missed only probably about 2, maybe 3 at the most, but no more than 3 classes in all the 52 years I've been at MIT. So that's one thing. And also MIT is a wonderful place to teach. That I've taught different courses at MIT: biochemistry, molecular biology, introductory biology to undergrads and all that stuff. Small classes, 30 to 40 and up to 400 students per class and things like that. And it's delightful to teach because students are quite receptive, and that they belong there. They're very smart students, and they're there to learn. And they're also very happy. They become very loyal to MIT. They speak affectionately about their experience at MIT and all that stuff. And the most important thing about teaching to me was that you constantly have to learn new things as you are teaching. As I teach different courses, I have to learn more about different courses. Even in the course that I teach, if the field is progressing rapidly, you have to keep up with the field and all that stuff. So it's been a constant process of learning for the 50 plus years I've been at the 52 years I've been in MIT. So that's what teaching has done. Teaching also brings all kinds of other benefits that I can give you one example. You teach many students who become, who went to go to graduate school after taking your undergraduate course. Or after taking your graduate course, they become faculty members and all that stuff. Yeah, and so they become well-known scientists themselves. And many of them go to medical school. They become famous doctors and all that. And one year, I had to take my wife to a local hospital, and for cardiac surgery. And we waited for the cardiac surgeon, and the cardiac surgeon arrived. And the first question he asked is, "Do you remember me?" And I did not. I have to admit. A well-known cardiac surgeon, by the way, at the Mass General. And I had not. And so I took a biochemistry course in 1970. And so he was a MIT undergraduate student who'd gone to medical school afterwards. So things like that. And that's not the only one. I often find, I go to dentists and they say, oh, I was at MIT and so and so. And so that is one of the pleasures that comes out of teaching, is things like that too. And just that every continent, has people that you have taken your course and has gone through MIT, and they remember MIT fondly, and hopefully also the courses that you gave. Yeah. Now research, I've done research. I'd said that I won't talk much about research, except that along with research comes, the need to constantly raise money. Because if you want to do research, you have to have people in the lab. You can, and you have to raise funds for that. And I've been fortunate in that I have had an NIH grant from National Institute of Health for all the time I've been at MIT. I've had the same grant. I've had a grant that went from 1970 to 2017 or something like that. The same grant. Being renewed every 3 years, every 4 years. In my case, in one time, I got what's called a merit award, and merit award allows you to keep the grant for 10 years. So a 10-year grant, so things like that. I've been fortunate. So, and then on top of that, I've had support from another NIH grant, American Cancer Society grant for 15 or 20 years. A grant from the United States Army Research Office for 15 years or so, and things like that. So that's really what, and I've been able to have a research program and for all these years. Yeah. And my research program really finished in, I would say, 2017, 2018. And then I've been teaching for the last 3 years. I've been just teaching and doing other things. Now, in terms of extraneous services, you have to do things for the department. You have to, unlike many places, unlike, for instance, in many places like in our own country, in Nepal, for instance, or things like that, is hiring decisions for the departmental faculty are made by the departmental faculty, not by some administrator at MIT or somebody else. We have to recruit a new faculty member in the department. There's a committee formed. The committee will evaluate this, or solicit applications, evaluate this application, and come with a recommendation. And that's discussed by the entire faculty of the department. And only based on that is the decision made as to whether to offer a person a position in the department or not. And so you have to be willing to serve as member of this. That's what's called a search committee. And I've been on many search committees. I've chaired many search committees. My search committee has hired and has been responsible for hiring at least 6 to 8 of the current faculty members in the department. So these are kinds of things you do, and you do other things. As was mentioned before, is that I've also been associate head of the department, so you help in the administrative side of it too. The associate head, you have to help basically the head of the department for 8 years, and so I did that. So I've had all experience. I was fortunate to have had that kind of experience, besides being able to help the department in other ways. That kind of experience, And I've had the pleasure of being in one of the best departments, and not only best, but one of the nicest of the departments to be. People are very friendly, congenial, and it consists of 3 separate, units, department in one building, cancer center, another building, and the Whitehead Institute, the 3rd building. And we now have connections with the Broad Institute and other institutes, McGovern Institute, Picower Institutes, and things like that. So many connections, all within MIT. So, and on top of that, for the institute, you also have to do things like, there are committee memberships you have to take care of, but you also have to do some important things like an institute professorship becomes vacant. There are only few institute professorships at MIT, and they're the most important, highest of the professorships you can get to at MIT. And I've been on a member committee of that picks up an institute professor or something like that, or member committee. There's a lectureship that's given annually by one member of MIT community, and also very important lectureship. And there's a committee that selects that, and I've been a member of that committee, chaired that committee, and things like that. So I have a lot of different experience, and that has enriched me, and that has broadened my horizons. And so MIT has been a really wonderful place to be. And so I think I have been here long enough. I should let you go. And it's been a joyride. It's been a joyride. I mean, I've been fortunate to have support from the family, from my parents. I learned so much that have helped me deal with life, which is easy at times, not so easy at other times. And work-wise, I've had colleagues that are tremendous people to interact with, have around. And students who have been really wonderful. And I've had my lab members who have contributed so much that I can never thank them enough. Yeah, so thank you for listening to me, to my story, and I hope that everybody is well in Nepal and here. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. RajBhandary. Such an inspiring, I was almost in tears several times. And then especially when you mentioned about your dad, I was very fortunate to meet your dad in 1998. I was trying to find some information about you. And then I was invited to your house, and then I met your dad, father. And then very first thing he did was he pulled out your publications paper and give it to us. And he was so proud, he was so proud. Yeah. So now I think now we will enter into Q&A session. So for that, I would like to welcome Dr. Bigyan Vista. Dr. Vista did PhD in cancer research from MIT, and then he interacted very closely with Dr. RajBhandary. And so Dr. Vista currently works in biotech investment. Bigyan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Prof. What an amazing opportunity for all of us to hear about the life journey of Dr. RajBhandary firsthand. As Prof. mentioned, I was a grad student at MIT in the same department and have had the distinct pleasure of visiting Dr. RajBhandary offices, sometimes unannounced. But it was amazing to be able to share either my progress or a lack of progress, or even just to update him about different initiatives like through MIT that were Nepal related. And I was particularly struck by how interested Dr. RajBhandary was in the stories about like the statistics related to Nepali scientists that I would share, right? Like the number of Nepali scientists now in the US, across the globe, the different initiatives they are undertaking in Nepal, the new nascent but growing research community in Kathmandu, and all of those stories. Dr. RajBhandary, I could really see, right, like a sense of pride and joy in all of those stories. And I've also bothered Dr. RajBhandary for my internal fellowship applications. So thank you once again. And for some of the introductions you have made outside of MIT. I would say that aside from kind of his accomplishment, I've always admired his kindness and generous spirit and his humility in particular. And I really hope the newer generation of scientists learn that a little. So with that, yeah, if you can submit your questions either through Facebook or Zoom, we'll try to incorporate as many of them as possible. We already have a handful, so maybe I'll start with a few. The first one, I mean, after hearing about like your journey and of all the accomplished people you have met throughout your career, like who do you consider the most influential on the personal side and professional side?
There are many, I think. And on the professional side, I can say that, in terms of in my own area, or in terms of biochemical, in the field of biochemistry, for instance, I would say that someone like Arthur Kornberg, Paul Berg. I mean, these are giants in what they do, what they achieved. Yeah, and yet, I think Paul Berg is probably one of the nicest people that you can think of. Yeah, and Paul has not only excelled in the science that he has done, and he also got the Nobel Prize in 1975 or 76, I think it was. Paul is that he also is what I would call a humanist. He's also interested in many other things. Even now, I think he's getting on. He's probably at least 3 or 4 years older than me, I think. Yeah. So he is still busy working on things and helping people. And so I think Paul Berg, I would say, is one of the greatest. Yeah. Now, in terms of science, I mean, I would say that, once again, being a little provincial, maybe, is Govind Khorana. And Govind Khorana contributed to science in ways that you can't imagine, because he was way ahead of everybody else. He was thinking about synthesizing a gene before people knew what a gene was. Yeah, before the sequence of any gene was known, he was thinking of synthesizing. So as soon as the sequence of a tRNA was published by Bob Hawley, 1965, he converted that tRNA into a DNA sequence, and he was synthesizing that gene. So that slide that you saw there on the board is a slide of how he was going to synthesize a gene for that alanine tRNA gene. Yeah, so that's his work contributed to the development of cloning, to the development of gene synthesis, and his students have gone on to do wonderful things. Like one of his postdocs, rather, Marvin Carruthers. Marvin Carruthers was at MIT. Was Wisconsin. He moved from Wisconsin to MIT with Khorana. And he left, and he was a guy who started a company. He was a really good chemist. He was a guy who started a company to synthesize DNA oligonucleotides. And without those DNA oligonucleotides, you and I wouldn't be anywhere, right? Because it's one of these things that has just revolutionized the way we do molecular biology. Yeah. So and I think so. I would say that people like that, and I mean. Now you can think of other giants, of like Crick, for instance, and things like that. If we talk about 20th century scientists, and there are many others. There are many others, but I would say that at least, and in my own department, it's Phil Sharp, David Baltimore, and these are tremendous guys who have contributed so much and continue to contribute so much,
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And then there is one comment and a question from the audience. Dr. Samir Koirala, he says, truly inspiring and fascinating stories. We are so fortunate to be listening. I'm struck how great scientific stories are at their heart, all human stories of generosity, perseverance, and collaboration. The question he has is, given that you have taught several generations of students, have you seen differences in how students perceive the value and purpose of their education now compared to before?
That's an interesting question. Yeah. So one of the things that I do at MIT is not only to teach students, but I also advise undergraduate students. So these are students that come to talk to you. They may not necessarily be biology majors, but usually they're biology majors, but they may not necessarily be biology majors, but they're still, you can be their advisor. And so you can learn quite a bit from students and their aspirations and all that stuff, as the years go by. But then, unfortunately, pretty soon they all melt, it's because it's so gradual that you see that you don't see a sharp transition in terms of then and now. Yeah. So it's difficult to see that, but I think students are more altruistic these days, perhaps more activistic, if I can use that word. I may not be even a good English word, but they believe more in activism, trying to get things done, a little less patient perhaps at the rate at which things are being done. And for instance, with climate change and things like that, I think they see they almost panic. They see the need for immediate action, and when the rest of the world seem to be unable to do anything about it, yeah, or unwilling even. They see it as unwilling to do anything about it. So that's but I see students more and more geared towards helping others. This, I think, the idea of empathy towards the human family, I see more now than I've seen before. So I think that is something that I would say is a trend that I see, but I could be wrong. But it's
Great. Yeah. And then the other question from Dr. Gopal Satkota from Dundee. And he again says, very inspiring journey. And his question is, in your research career, what technological advance do you think has made the most profound impact overall?
not my work, but the work,
I guess in
the whole general area.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there are many things that have done that. I can see I can tell you a story. When genetic code was established in 1966, a lot of people were saw that as the end to an era. Yeah, because people had been really puzzled by what it would be, what it would show, and all that stuff. All of a sudden, the answer was quite clear, and it's an unequivocal as to what the answer was. Yeah, and there's one of the sages of molecular biology, very well-known guy, Gunther Stent. Gunther Stent wrote an article, said molecular biology is dead. I think published in Science or somewhere. And the idea was that he said that, look, the most important problem in biology is solved now. So now you're going to see just decline. There's nothing to aspire to. And how wrong he was. He was criticized roundly by even his best friends for that article. And how wrong he was, because then all of a sudden we saw cloning. Yeah, and that was an enormous advance. We saw DNA sequencing. That was another enormous advance. We saw oligonucleotide synthesis, tremendous advance. We saw PCR, that revolutionized the way we do biology. Yeah, and all of these things, are one things after another. And I wouldn't say they're incremental, they're major advances. Yeah. And now the PCR credit is a different thing as to whether PCR should be credited to the guy who got the Nobel Prize or not. But I won't comment on that.
And then there are a few kind of fun questions, if you will, because we have spent so much time on the scientific journey. One of them is, what do you like to do in your free time? Like, what are your hobbies outside of bench science?
Hobbies, yeah. So when I was, I don't play it now. One of the games I really got used to in England, and then I brought it here, and then I played it for over the years at MIT with many colleagues, Rick Young, Graham Walker, Barbara Meyer, all the young guys, is squash.
Nice.
That's one of the things that I really like to do, is playing squash. Now I can't play squash, but what I like to do, I like to go for walks. Where I live, it's a nice place to go for walks and things like that. So I can do that. My daughter sometimes comes and goes for walks with me, and she helps me, just to get around and all that stuff. So
I see.
yeah, I do that. I can't. I mean, I used to go to the gym until the pandemic started, so I quit going to the gym for now, at least. Maybe I'll do that.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds great. And then there are quite a few questions that want you to time travel. So one of the questions is, if you were able to go back and choose a career today, like start all over, what would that be?
That is a very good question. That is one of these things where you're biased by what you've done, and whether you really like it or not like it. Yeah, But in my case, that what I have done, even though it may not have been my choice, but I was kind of gradually led to it, to the path that I've chosen, and I am satisfied with the results, right? But if I had to do it again, I would do a couple more things. I've always felt that if I have had a medical degree on top of the research career that I have had, it would have been a really important plus. So I have often wished that I had a medical degree, because I think a medical background really helps many people in their research career. And there are many MD, PhDs, who are tremendous successes, and there are many people, MDs, like Arthur Kornberg, this MD who has a medical degree. Paul Berg, I don't know if Paul had an MD or not, but a medical degree. And also, if I had had a broader education, I think, and the sad thing is, of course, that, we did not have that opportunity in Nepal at that time, of having had a broader education, like, in different, like different subjects, being forced to take, being required to take different subjects. We didn't have that. So for instance, if I had taken botany and zoology, that would really have also helped my research career in terms of, understanding, going into ecology and many other stuff. So yeah, that's those are kinds of now. I think that's, again, I'm taking a very narrow view here. I'm thinking of, would I have been a good writer? I think not. Would I have been, good entrepreneur? No, definitely not. Because it's just not in my, people say it's not in my DNA, but that's not correct. But it's not just, I don't think I'll be good at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the other question, which is kind of interesting, because you left Nepal at a very young age and have had this international exposure when that was not even a thing for most people in Nepal. So the question goes, this is from Sagar Shakya. I'm curious about the challenges you faced as a Nepali scientist in the international scientific community.
Interesting. Yeah, I think one of the really good things about science is that science somehow melds people together. The science part of it becomes so strong that who you are does not matter really much. I mean, I saw that in Gobind, and Gobind, had no problem, collaborating with people, and all that stuff. And I too have not felt anything, that standing in my way. Can I imagine that? Well, yes, you can always imagine that. But to me, it has not been a problem at all. I mean, I've not felt that my colleagues look at me differently, or my students look at me differently. And I think it's. I don't think I have. Within the realm of science, I think I have not seen anything that separated me or distinguished me from others, from the way others are treated.
I see. Yeah. And then this one is kind of interesting. This goes back to the point you raised earlier, just the pace of innovation and sometimes kind of lack of realization of the eventual impact that some of the advancements can have, like in the future. This question is a bit futuristic. This asks, what are the most pressing ethical implications of said advancements in biomed biotech? And maybe not just about now, but even looking forward, in your view.
Yeah, a difficult question to answer. I think, it's the kind of thing that was first raised when cloning came. Idea of cloning came is that, could you do permanent harm to it? Should you be even doing certain types of experiments and all that stuff? And, as you know, there was a committee that was put together and they came with recommendations and things like that. And by and large, that has held. Yeah. Now, more recently, the question has come up again with the use of CRISPRs. Yeah, as to what you can do with CRISPRs as scientific advances become more and more elaborate and more easily doable by anyone with a small lab. These questions will keep coming up all the time. Is that should one ban certain types of experiments, or should one not allow, just absolutely not allow? Should there be some kind of an international ban? Yeah. And I think the answer is difficult in the sense that a ban is probably too strong a thing, but on the other hand, I think there are certain things that probably should be banned. Yeah, and so I think it depends. But future, I can't think of future really, because to me, I have to go with the knowledge that we have now. Yeah, and because future developments, who knows what will develop in the future, and all kinds of things can happen, Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, and then because there are a lot of young scientists in this crowd, there are a couple of questions which are about striking the right work-family balance. So one of the questions is, MIT is known to be a high-pressure place, and you are working on very exciting areas of research. How did you balance your work life and family life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think it's something that everybody faces. I think in my case, one thing that I made a point of doing is never to take my work home, and never to bring any problems that I have at home to work. Keep my two lives separate, that there are times when there are difficult times in the lab, or I'm writing a grant and I have a deadline or something like that, and you're short of time and things like that. But the way things are, that and the kind of life that I have had is that you can't say, yeah, I'm not going to take my work home, because you will not survive if you don't take your work home. Because you have to work at home. You have to be able to do your work at home. Also, is that you don't, you temperamentally, you have to keep those separate. In that, you You don't, if you have it particularly having a difficult time at work, you don't want that to affect your behavior at home. Yeah, and that requires some control, some understanding, and same thing with if you have problems at home, for instance. You know, I mean, I've had tragedies in my life that you tried not to let that affect your behavior in the lab. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. The other one also kind of relates to, about like the professional state of biomedical research now. It goes, how do you compare the biomedical research environment back then and now? Many people complain about the current situation, like not having enough funding, or even talented people not getting opportunities or enough faculty slots, etc.
It is a problem. I think the problem also is that the trend of research is getting more and more multidisciplinary. Yeah, more and more high throughput, and all of these require groups of people collaborating, working together and collaborating. And so, you know, you have papers written by 25 authors or 35 authors or whatever have you. And so the contribution of any particular person really melts, you know, compared to the senior author of the paper or the first author of the paper. And so in the past, you know, I mean, I can tell you that when I finished my first major work, I published 6 papers back to back in the journal. And it was in the Journal of Biological Chemistry. And I was told by somebody, faculty member in the biology department, that when he read that paper, a series of papers, he knew that I would be the right hire. Now, that kind of thing probably does not happen now. Yeah, you know, because it's much of, you know, I mean, it's still, you know, it's the trend. I'm just talking about the trend, yeah, okay, because it's not that, you know, not that you can't have the contribution of any particular person or persons be obvious in a paper, but that the trend is with this type of work that's being done, and because as data gathering becomes very, you know, important and possible in that you can gather massive amounts of data and then analyze it, you know, is that, you know, more and more people are taking that route, and it becomes, you know, it's just, yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
I see. And this one is another kind of fun question, because some of us have heard stories of other MIT faculty members, like who have visited Nepal, and yeah, either because of you or encouraged by you. Any interesting stories to share?
Now, the people from my own department who have visited Nepal, I mean, that's something that I think is, I would dearly love to happen. Is not only that you know, that Nepal and its universities make it possible for people from this country or other countries who are interested in Nepal as a country, you know, invite them to spend 3 months, you know, of their time in Nepal, giving lectures and things like that, and really, you know, have them more like adjunct faculty status, so that they can be coming back every year if they do so want. And that would be one way of bringing people from outside to Nepal, do something useful to Nepal, and at the same time for them to having a good time and understand Nepal. That's something that I would really very much like to see it. And maybe with the new universities coming and all that stuff, that is a possibility. That's something that's really should, because the more contacts that we have with people with a different, different outlook in what a university should be, right? Hiring and recruitment and promotions and things like that, taking advantage of the expertise of others from outside, taking advantage of their and take an unbiased approach. People who can take an unbiased approach to these causes, like we have in my department and in all departments at MIT, you have things called visiting committees. Visiting committees come every 2 years. In my case, in our case, every 2 years. In the biology department is a visiting committee of about 20 odd people will come every 2 years to evaluate the department. And they make recommendations that's then taken seriously by the higher upper administration at MIT, like the provost office or the president's office. Yeah. And that kind of thing really would greatly help our universities too. To have someone coming from outside having an unbiased approach and just saying what's right and what's wrong with what's being done at the place. And so that, from that point of view, also is the more contacts we have with the people from outside Nepal, the better it is. And I can tell you that people from my department who have visited Nepal have really loved it. People, they go for trekking, they love the trek and all that stuff, but I'm sure they would be, and they've often commented on, their experience has always been positive, but then they have not visited universities as such. They were there for sake of pleasure. They were there for a week, 2 weeks, something like that. And they have not had the opportunity to really take a look at the university. And that's what I hope that will happen, is that we'll have more and more contact, and the more contact we have with the outside world, the better.
Thank you. Yeah, and fortunately, we do have several representatives of upcoming universities in Nepal, and I'm sure, they are taking notes. So thank you, Dr. RajBhandary. One other question, let me check. So this one kind of relates to the current pandemic environment and COVID-19 disinformation. So the question goes, now more than ever, general public seems to have more mistrust in science. Is this something that will stay, or is there something that the scientific community can do to alleviate that?
Yeah, I think this is a problem in this country also, not just in Nepal. Yeah, and I think it's just that when science becomes politicized, really, that's a real sad story, because it should not be the case. Science is impartial. Science goes after facts. And scientists have no reason to do anything but go after the facts, because that's the whole basis of their survival, scientific survival. You want to get at the facts. Now, unfortunately, in this country, it's become politicized. Mistrust of science. And I hope that does not happen in Nepal. Particularly this question of whether to take vaccines or not vaccines, right? I think every country has benefited immensely with the use of vaccines, for not just for this COVID, but for every other kind, polio, smallpox, and other two prime examples that we can think of. We can think of diphtheria, meningitis. And things like that. Others we can think of vaccinations against the stomach disease. What's that? Just so many things that we benefit from vaccinations. Is that it should not be a question of whether you need to get vaccinated or not, but because and particularly along with the fact that these vaccines seem to be relatively. But I say relatively because I think harmless. Yeah, I mean, granted that 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million will suffer some adverse reaction, but then you can have adverse reactions to anything. But for the kind of efficacy or efficiency of the vaccines, for the fact that the vaccines work at such a high level, with such a high degree of conviction, that that it should be not not an argument. But it is in this country, and I hope it's not. That's not in Nepal, because Nepal needs people to be saved from this thing, that hopefully it won't come back again. And it's up and down from what I understand now, and it's just really sad.
One other question relates to, like, over your decades spanning research career, how has science evolved in India and China, in your view?
China is just an absolute explosion. I think I used to have, my feeling was that China had tremendous potential in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, but had not really achieved much. But with a change of policies by the government, and with their being able to now encourage people to leave China to go on study, but then come back to China, and making it really hospitable for them to at least be able to do their own work. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but at least they can do their own work that they want to do. I think China has made tremendous strides in the last 20 years. And I would say China is really coming close to being what United States is. And it will, I think they will be competing strongly with the United States in terms of scientific, potential. India, I think, has had its situation depends very much on its economy. And India went through a tremendous economic boom when I think India also began to support science in a major way. Now, I think as the economy suffers a little bit, I don't know what's going to happen. But I think Indian science is good. Some of the institutes of technology that India has are very good. They're producing students that are widely appreciated as being excellent students. And they have had no problem coming to this country and getting into jobs or positions at the universities. But China has got made major strides.
Yeah, and the hope is, sandwiched between those two giants.
Yeah.
At least, Nepal can benefit, like from like learning by osmosis.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully, that happens.
Yeah.
And then, maybe just two more questions, because we are approaching, almost 1 o'clock on the East Coast, and even later in Nepal. So there is one from, I think this is from Dr. Arjun Karki. What would be the 3 most important lessons that you have learned in life that you wish to share with our younger generation?
I don't want to be, the thing that comes to mind is hard work, patience, and perseverance. I mean, it's easy to say that because that's what I have had to do, but I don't know that is something that I would recommend to everybody. But in success in life requires all these 3 and focus. You have to stay with a problem, not quit too easily. And yet not to be so obstinate that when you see that nothing is working, that you still are sticking with it. Yeah, so there comes a time of, so we can talk about judgment, good judgment. I mean, that's not, I have to say good judgment is not a very objective word. And it's, in my own case, I think I would say that, hard work, patience, and perseverance are the things that have and willing to take risks at times is another thing that is important. But to stay with a problem over a period and not quitting just because it's not working right now means that you'll just go from place to place to place and not get too far.
Words. Thank you. And I guess this last question, this is a bit.
And my regards to Dr. Karki, by the way.
Yeah, and this one is a bit futuristic. So the question is, even non-scientists are describing the 21st century as the century of biology. And what do you think will be the biggest advancements in the next 40 to 50 years? Will cancer be cured? Will aging be reversed?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, that is really predicting the future. Will cancer be cured? I think cancer is slowly being cured. Very, very slowly being cured. There are some cancers that I think the survival rate is much better now than it's been in the past. And I think it will continue to be. So I think, will cancer be cured? I can't say definitively, but there will be improvements in treatment of cancer and the survival rates of cancer. Yeah, and what was the other question?
Aging.
Aging, yeah. I don't really know that. I mean, again, work is being done, claims are being made, but I'm not sure that it will withstand the test of time. I don't really know that so much. I would say that if there's another major advance we should look forward to, it will be in the area of neurobiology. And I think that is where, with the new techniques that have been coming out and with all the things that one can do now, one can look more and more closely at brain function and all that stuff. And I think there will be, it's hoped, I hope, that there will be some major advances in that
area. Amazing. Yeah.
And I have to say that all of these have been made possible by advances in molecular biology.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think anyone here doubts that. With that, I think, I'm going to thank all the participants for their excellent questions. We have a lot more like here, but it would take us the whole day. So maybe we should think about, wrapping up the program. I'm going to hand the baton back to Prabhat.
Thank you, Vigyan, and thank you, everybody. So many excellent questions. So once again, and so one thing I should tell Dr. RajBhandary is that there is a popular demand to ask you to come back. So we'll think about it. We'll discuss with you later. So and okay. Now, so we are very close toward the end. So what I would like to do is, now I would like to welcome Dr. Tara Sigdel to do the closing remarks. He is an associate professor at the University of California and works in the kidney mechanism behind the kidney transplantations. Very interesting work. And he's also a founding member of INBS. Dr. Sigdel.
Thank you, Prabhatji. Thank you, everyone. On behalf of International Nepali Biomedical Society, I would like to thank Dr. RajBhandary for this historic event, sharing your special journey with us. Your successful and inspiring story inspires us and will inspire many generations to come. You are inspiring both on your scientific achievement, contribution, and your humble personality, which is a rarity. We are proud of your achievement and congratulations, sir. We are also grateful to all of you who are in attendees side on Zoom call and all of you who watched us through Facebook Live. I see very many respectful personalities here today and many questions that we could not include because of time constraints, and we hope you understand our limitations. INBS aims to provide a platform for all Nepali biomedical scientists, students, and professionals to foster effective communication and networking among each other. The goal is to also promote biomedical research and collaboration in Nepal. There is a way to stay connected with International Nepali Biomedical Society by visiting the site with address nepal-biomed.org. There is a survey form if you would like to fill that will give your contact information to us and we'll keep you in the loop. You can also connect us through email by sending email to biomednepal@gmail.com, INBS Facebook page, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We aim to come up with more events that will make our networking and communication more substantive and bring Nepali biomedical community closer. Thank you again and have a nice weekend. Namaste.